What time is it? Let me check my watch. Oh, it's bone o'clock.
Last chance to make weird mouth sounds.
And I'm going to swish some water. we
Did I do an accent?
You have to decide right now.
Yeah.
People really like my British accent.
Well,
They think it's sexy, love.
Crikey. No,
if
that's
you commit,
Australia.
I won't say anything.
But if you do it, you really do have to do it the whole time. Okay, no, I don't think you need to. Creative call.
All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. Bring anything bones. Two goofy gals with deathly interest go on a skeleton inquest in your headphones. Anything bones.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. I'm Sophie Schwartz.
And I'm Katelyn Hart. Hello and hi to you.
Hello and hi to you on this beautiful Sunday morning. It's been storming all day, but we're cozy inside with our bones and our blankets.
I bet it's pretty sunny in Berkeley, where our guest for today is. This person's very special to me. He's like a brother to me. I've known him since high school. This is law dog Gus Tupper.
Hi, everyone. Proud law dog, proud heart brother. And yes, it's always sunny and 70 degrees in Berkeley, no matter what.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's my hometown, actually. So
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm a Bay Area babe. So it's nice to be in some degree of contact with it. But I was going to ask, for those who don't know the official terminology, how would one define a law dog?
It's like it should be broadly construed. Like if you are law adjacent in any way, like paralegals, legal assistants, like anyone who interacts with the law, like if you like volunteer with the NLG or the ACLU or whatever, sure, you're a law dog. So truly anyone.
I thought you were going to say if you volunteer with the law.
But being arrested does not make you a law dog. Correct.
Case by case basis, I'd say,
depends
could
what
go either
for.
way.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I like that.
Gus is very law adjacent because he just finished law school and is a lawyer, right?
It's true. Yeah. I finished in May, and now I am a teaching fellow at Berkeley Law.
Ooh.
Working on eliminating fines and fees in juvenile delinquency cases in various Western states. So tomorrow I should be testifying to the Wyoming legislature about why they should get rid of fines and fees.
That's
so
awesome.
Cool.
That's very cool. Is this going to be a Zoom affair? I guess it has to be.
It will be, yeah. Because unfortunately for us all, I'm not in Wyoming.
Is it unfortunate though?
Seems like there's a lot of bolo ties there, so I could really be living my best.
I was gonna say you would look quite charming in a bolo tie.
Thank you.
And a t-shirt.
I'm wearing a full suit right now for anyone listening.
Yes. Actually, like a British barrister's outfit with the powdered wig, right?
Which brings me to my accent.
Gus just asked before we started recording if he should do an accent for the whole time. I discouraged it, which I feel really guilty about. So sorry.
I was in favor. I'm going to go ahead and get that on the record. I wanted it to happen. But I'm here to stir the shit. But speaking of shits needs be stirring, Katelyn, do you want to start us off with a fun bone story?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to you today about this guy named Fred Tokars. And I did spell that phonetically for myself. It is Tokars, but it's spelled Tokars. This took place in Atlanta, right around the time of all of our births. My sources here were an article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution by Bill Torpy, an article from East Cobb News by Wendy Parker, and then Daily Mail, an article by Megan Sheets. Lots of fun names today.
I was gonna say there's a lot of fun. I don't like to laugh at people's names, but Torpal is
Torpy.
I thought you said Torpal.
Did I? Well, if I did, I'm so sorry. Don't play it back. So the villain / main character of this story, Fred Tokars, has been in the news a little bit lately, but if I tell you why, it's going to be a spoiler. So just know that. I'm going to take you back to November of 1992 in Atlanta. Sarah Tokars, who is Fred's wife, was with her and her 2 sons. They were 4 and 6 years old. They were coming home after visiting relatives in Florida. Shout out to Florida, because I know Gus loves it there.
Go Gators.
So they were coming home from a trip to Florida. Remember, this is Atlanta, Georgia. But before they got in the house, they were confronted by a gunman who forced his way into the vehicle, kidnapping the whole family except for the dad. He held Sarah at gunpoint. After she pulled over, he shot her in the head in front of her 2 sons. The sons were unharmed.
I mean, thank God for that, but that's about the most horrific thing you can witness.
Horrible, right? Just absolutely disgusting.
I would argue the sons were not all right.
No, they were physically all right, but mentally, I'm sure they were just not at all okay. So Bill Torpy, the reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, was called to the crime scene the next day. And I'm curious if you know who this person is, Gus. He saw Supreme Court Justice Leah Sears Collins hugging a sobbing man who turned out to be Fred Tokars. Do you know Justice Leah Sears Collins, the first Black woman on the Georgia Supreme Court?
I haven't heard that name.
Well, that's okay.
I'm sure she's dope, unless she's not. There are
she is dope. That was a little like additional knowledge. She doesn't really have anything to do with this story, but Fred Tokars did have a lot of pull in his community. So that was part of one of my sources, was talking about how he knew all these people in important places, because he was a prosecutor and he did a lot of advertising on billboards and TV ads. Gus is giving us a big thumbs down.
We're not a prosecutor family, y'all.
Okay.
Public defenders are bust.
Yeah. So this whole thing is initially investigated as a robbery gone wrong, but we don't think that's what happened, do we? Fred repeatedly.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. The question was, did they take anything? I don't know, because pretty quickly they realized who did it.
Yeah.
So Fred repeatedly was trying to portray himself as this grieving father, even though he was definitely a suspect from the very beginning. So he was at a news conference before he was arrested, and he said, quote, "I emphatically deny any involvement in my wife's murder. And then I became very depressed and started to think of the lifestyle that I was losing. Not only my wife, but my whole lifestyle."
Oh, red flag. As soon as they do that turn from like, oh no, like I'm so worried about my wife, to like, oh no, my lifestyle.
Yeah, this has really changed my lifestyle.
Very weird. Just not okay.
Creepy, bad, no.
My lifestyle. They've kidnapped my lifestyle.
So turns out Fred's a really bad guy. He's associated with murderous drug figures, like his whole practice and everything. He's just a creepy, skeezy lawyer guy. And police theorize that his wife was suspicious of what her husband was getting up to. And he was so worried about this lifestyle, right? Well, the lifestyle was just like his criminal lifestyle. And he thought his wife was going to rat him out, basically.
Oh.
So turns out he and his sometime business partner don't like that. This guy's name is Eddie Lawrence. The two of them hired a young ex-con named Curtis Rower to kill Sarah, Fred's wife. The murder happens in 1992. In 1994, Fred is found guilty on federal racketeering charges.
Tight.
So, yeah. So we haven't even gotten to his murder trial yet.
I have a question.
Please.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, Gus, but I feel like I don't know what racketeering is.
I don't have like a great definition for you, but it's like, or it has to do with like organized crime and money. So it like there has to be like the mob involved and money involved for it to be racketeering.
Cool.
Yeah, I can tell you what he was doing. He was participating in a criminal this is a quote, participating in a criminal enterprise that transported, distributed, and sold cocaine. He invested proceeds from illegal drug sales in Atlanta nightclubs that he incorporated, and he protected the members from arrest and prosecution through kidnapping, torture, and murder. So this is the group he's associated with.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be like he protected them through the law, but murder and kidnapping.
Well, that's what this article says. It seems to me like he was just their lawyer. Like, I don't think he was actually doing the killing and everything, but he was okay with it, I guess, because he was just, the
lifestyle.
Yeah. His lifestyle, his wonderful, gorgeous lifestyle was getting ruined by justice. Whatever.
My lifestyle.
So he's already in prison in 1994, but then in 1997, they decide to try him for the murder of his wife. And the trial actually had to be moved to Lafayette, Georgia, because he was such a prominent figure in Atlanta. He was on, like I said, he was on billboards and the TV and stuff. So he couldn't really necessarily get a fair trial in Atlanta, is what happened. He did get convicted of the murder, but the jury wouldn't sentence him to death, which allegedly the victim's family was really pissed off about. Ooh. Yeah, my story is pretty much just a bummer. Welcome to our true crime podcast.
Very good.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating. I love to hear about these cases where once kind of these people step over this line and do something really horrendous, everything else about them comes to light.
Yeah. This guy was a bad dude. According to testimony, he specifically wanted to kill the kids when they came back from this Florida trip. Which I guess was a Thanksgiving Florida trip, because this happened November 29th, 1992. I believe that's either Thanksgiving or around Thanksgiving. I don't know why he would specifically want that. Maybe because he wasn't on the trip, so it's like an alibi type thing, whatever. And his business partner, this guy, Eddie Lawrence, he testified to this. He said, "Oh, well, aren't you concerned that the kids are going to witness the murder?" And Fred told him, "Oh, don't worry, quote, my sons will get over it. They're young."
Holy shit.
This is hearsay, right, Gussie?
Mm-hmm.
But sorry. I don't know why I called you that. That's not a thing we do. So it was hearsay, but I kind of believe it. This guy was such an asshole. Just because they're young, 4 and 6, doesn't mean they're going to just forget such a traumatic thing happening. So he just had no regard.
That's monstrous. I mean,
Disgusting.
Obviously having your wife killed is also monstrous, but holy fuck.
Yeah, to do it in front of the kids is just a whole different fucked up level.
And they'll just get over it. No, they're
so
fucked
young.
for life. No, they're fucked for
Exactly.
life. They will remember that.
So the gunman was convicted and he got life without parole. I guess there was a mistrial with Eddie Lawrence's case. He was the business partner, but he ended up pleading guilty to his role in the murder. He served 12 years and he also testified against the other 2 assholes.
Cool. Glad he got some lenient treatment for that.
Oh God, you're going to like this next part or not. So in prison, it circulates that Fred is a lawyer, and I guess he started to get treated really badly for this. People would beat him up and tell him threaten to kill him if he didn't work on their appeals, things like that. So, I mean, it sounds like it was really really bad for him in prison. And maybe because of this, or in spite of this, I'm not really sure, he did actually help federal authorities solve 6 murders, according to his attorney. Like, he would kind of snitch on people, and he ended up getting himself in witness protection.
At the very least that such a horrific person could do would to be like, oh, hey, I heard this is the guy who killed so-and-so. It's like, oh, thank you, but you're still a horrific piece of shit.
You still had your wife murdered in front of your 2 tiny, tiny children. So Fred was never considered for leniency, but like I said, he did get into witness protection. So he ended up having his own jail cell, his own bathroom, cable TV, wahoo. And it says he had access to phone calls, but that he wasn't able to talk to his sons ever again, which he wanted to do. But like, dude, you killed their mom. Do you think they want to talk to you? I don't know. It's a whole fucked up situation.
That is horrifying.
Unfortunately, here's where we get to the current stuff. In April 2020, the 4-year-old son, he was 4 at the time of his mother's murder, he unfortunately died of a pulmonary embolism at the age of 31. I know, awful. And then about a month later, Fred Tokars dies of natural causes at the prison he's at a prison in Pennsylvania, I guess. And he had a lot of health problems for years. His attorney said he hadn't walked in 10 years. And he maintained his innocence up until he died. But he did it, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, that's so fucked. Of course he fucking did it.
He did it. So yeah, that's my story. It was a downer, but it was law adjacent, just like Law Dog here.
Yeah, that was a real bummer.
Are you going to tell us another bummer?
So I have like one part of my thing is like a very structural bummer for sure. I am all about social justice content. So it's hard for me sometimes listening to true crime and stuff because I don't believe that the police or prison should exist. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, somebody has to do something about this horrible dad and keep him away from his 4 children. So I'm glad that he never talked to them again.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. That's not something that I've ever heard discussed on a true crime podcast. So thank you.
But I agree with that it's hard sometimes because I feel like our prison system and like, systems of policing are so fucked. But then there are these people where you're like, well, what do we do with this guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And those are the really difficult cases that, people love to bring up when arguing against prison and police abolition, and there's no good answer.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I want to talk about phrenology, which is a fake, like it's a pseudoscience, and it it definitely still sort of exists in various awful forms, but they were comparing a lot of things that I love and care about to phrenology, though. And they were like, personality tests are just a modern form of phrenology. And I was like, oh my God, don't take that away from me.
Because you love those.
Absolutely.
You love those. That's so funny because you do love those. And I don't mind them because I took a lot of them in psychology classes.
Right.
So I got really, I don't want to say good at them because like there is no good or bad, but like I got very comfortable just being like, here's what I think, like trying not to overthink it because I had to take so many goddamn tests like that.
Those tests always make me very anxious because I took a lot of those when I was a kid for like ADHD testing and stuff like that. And I would always be like, is this the right answer? Am I answering it right? Is this how I am? Can you tell me?
To which the test said, no.
To which the test said, fuck you, you're 7, figure it out.
My sources are a Harvard Law Review article by Pierre Schlag, continuing the tradition of great names. And an article from the Early American Studies Journal by Susan Branson, and then an episode of These Days, which is a radio show on KPBS. But phrenology is a pseudoscience that was founded in like the 18th century and tried to predict behaviors, skills, personality traits by like they measured bumps on the skull, and they were like, these
Yeah.
bumps on your skull tell us if you're going to be smart, if you're going to be good, if you're and, like, we're not going to bother defining those terms because we all know what they are, what it means.
Oh, yes.
So just like, here's your intelligence bump. That's just
God.
a thing we can measure. The idea is that your brain is a muscle, and you're working, or maybe many muscles, I don't know. But like, you're working out the little, this little nubbin up here, that's compassion nubbin. And then as you really work out your compassion nubbin, it starts to get bigger, like a muscle would do, fucking obviously. And then it would push out on your skull. So like,
Yeah.
super logical. That's how I want all of my science to be done, is just logical inferences that anyone could make walking down the street. That's how I like my science.
And anything that can like touch your face too. Gus really hates having his face touched, even before the pandemic.
Well, who's laughing now?
Yeah.
Exactly. The human brain. But it led to, the idea that like, you have a morality quadrant of your brain, right, or whatever. And, the other part of the reasoning by analogy was, if we have eyeballs for seeing, why isn't like a certain specific part of our brain goo for being nice or being rich? So, you get it.
I feel like
I get it.
Yeah, I feel like it is a leap one can take when science is new.
Yeah, we're all phrenologists now. Like, right.
You can go down and buy your own fucking phrenology head at Urban Outfitters.
Oh, that sounds about right for what Urban
For
Outfitters
them.
is.
Yep.
Didn't I really used to like just love Urban Outfitters? I was like, I can't get into this store fast enough. Like, buy all these weird tchotchkes and things that I'll never wear again.
I feel like it used to be like not particularly expensive, and they hadn't done all of their horrible like eating disorder marketing.
Yeah.
And it was great, but now it's turned dark and expensive. So there's this guy, Franz Joseph Gall, who was the founder of phrenology. This is a quote from the Harvard Law Review article that I think is quoting something from like 1790 or whatever. And it says, Franz Joseph Gall was a handsome man with a pleasant countenance and a broad, noble head. Indeed, the towering forehead seems to have been a characteristic feature of a good number of important phrenologists. So,
wow. So they were like, my head good. So therefore, I need to look for my traits on other people's heads.
Right. And it's just like white men being like, I'm balding, so I'm smart.
Look at how big and wide my forehead is. My brain has pushed it out this far.
I mean, not to brag, but...
Look at that.
For the listeners, I was just displaying my forehead proudly.
And I'm going to go ahead and say that it is beautiful. It is wide. It looks like your brain has gone ahead and made you some beautiful nubbins.
Thank you. I like to think so.
Really is one of the smartest people I know.
Yikes for you.
I bet your head feels good. I haven't felt it in a while, but I bet it feels good.
She misses you.
Yeah.
So I think like when we're talking about like, genetic characteristics giving you indications about personality and innate qualities, it's pretty clear that this is going to turn into racism and sexism real quick.
Yeah.
So Gall's disciples were all about racism and sexism. So women were thought to have underdeveloped brain organs necessary for success in the arts and sciences, but they had larger mental organs relating. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
It's fucking ridiculous. Please laugh.
Larger mental organs relating to the care of children and religion. I also just really like that it's like you can have nubbins for anything. It's like, yeah, it's not just like intelligence or like qualities. It's like, this one is rich. This is your rich nubbin. And this one is your childcare nubbin. It's like, those are just activities. Like, how can, I don't know.
Over here, I have my sloppy Joe nubbin. And over here is my nail painting nubbin. No.
Like, don't they all have to at least be nouns or something? Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, with all these nubbins, if you have a nubbin for all these fucking things, your head would look like a crazy porcupine.
Exactly.
With all the nubs.
And sorry for my email ding. I turned it off, I promise.
No, you're all good. I'm guilty of that quite frequently.
Good. But like the phrenology, I guess, was born out of this desire to study brains like a scientist rather than like metaphysical in a metaphysical way. There wasn't psychology yet, Katelyn. There was like God stuff. It was like you could have religion telling you about how your brain worked, but nothing else. And, you know, they were just trying to explain the difference between different humans, but especially because of this like relationship between brain science, such as it was in the 1700s, and religion, phrenology was always like super controversial. Like, not only were there people who were like, this sounds like gibberish, there were also super religious types who were like, no, your soul is not in your brain. Morality is determined by your soul. And that like hovers around you or in your halo or whatever.
Of course your soul's not in your brain. That's fucking ridiculous.
Right. So that was our major complaint about phrenology in the late 1700s. And then there were like, people had very strong opinions about phrenology forever. Mark Twain was really into pranking phrenologists. So he like dressed as a homeless person basically and went into the American Phrenological Society or something and was like, touch my bumps. And they
Can't
were
do
like,
that
oh,
anymore.
Yeah, different times, man. Cancel culture, am I right? So they were like, oh, your skull is bad. You don't have like your rich bump is really underdeveloped. Your no meaningful humor bump, whatever. And then he went back in the next day and was like, hello, Mark Twain reporting for duty. And they were like, amazing. Look at your giant humor bump. And they just said like the exact opposite thing. And then he trolled them in the equivalent of, you know, the 19th century equivalent of a tweet, which was a very long newspaper article.
Perfect.
It's like, listen up, everybody. Phrenology's a bunch of bullshit.
Exactly. But on the other side of the coin is Walt Whitman, who was a huge phrenologist.
Oh my God.
He had his phrenology chart done, which, like, when I read that, I was like, do not tell me that astrology is based on phrenology, because I will throw you into the lake. I guess I'm talking to my computer here because I was reading off that.
It's the royal we. I will throw you, the idea of you, into the lake.
Exactly. But anyway, he got his phrenology chart done, and it, you know, it said whatever it said because they knew it was Walt Whitman. They were like, you're a creative genius. Everything you do is going to be so good. And he had it printed in all of his books for like the latter portion of his life. No. Just to be like, look, my poetic genius was predestined. And if you don't like it, you are dumb.
You can suck it if you don't like my weird shaped head.
Exactly.
Here's a map of my bumps and some poems. What do you think? Call me back. I'm Walt Whitman.
Yeah, so that's just like some background on phrenology. I do have a specific story to tell you about the Amistad case. And this is like a case that every single law dog listening to this podcast will remember with horror. You have to read it in like your first semester of law school. Okay. It's foundational to American property law. It's the first Supreme Court case about slavery, and it was the most important Supreme Court case about slavery until there were more important ones, and really important international law case. So the Amistad was a slave ship. It, had a bunch of kidnapped Black people on it who were mostly Mende from the area around what's now Sierra Leone, and were being transported on this ship, the Amistad, to the US, but some of them got free during the voyage, like broke out of their chains and freed the other people in chains on the ship, and started beating their captors. And then none of them knew how to sail, so they kept some of the sailors alive and told them to take the ship back to Africa. And the crew was like, yeah, we're doing it, but they just took it to Long Island. And so the ship was taken by the Coast Guard. Oh, and this is like, I don't remember the exact date, it's like the 1840s. Like 1840-ish. And I feel like this is sort of like, I was looking for a concrete example and this one came up, and I was like, well, this is like a very important case, so I should talk about it. But it's also like, I don't want to give the impression that I'm like, the Supreme Court is great, but they do the right thing here. And like everything kind of works out in this one particular case. And like even the phrenologists are like sort of okay. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm pro phrenology or Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court ended up finding that the Black people on board had never been property, so they couldn't be sold into slavery, and they couldn't be convicted of a crime because they were, quoting the Supreme Court here, unlawfully kidnapped and forcefully and wrongfully carried on board a vessel, which is like, well, like, hell yeah.
At least they got that right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like not what I would have expected from the Supreme Court in the 1840s, but
it's extremely progressive.
So they declared the people free, and they did overturn the lower court's ruling that the president had to return the people to Africa, which is kind of a bummer. They just ended up.
They just lived in Long Island.
I think that there was a pretty robust abolitionist movement at the time, and like an abolitionist lawyer argued their case to the Supreme Court. And I think I know that the people from the Amistad ended up back, like they were repatriated to West Africa. And I think it was like, abolitionists raised money and hired a boat or whatever. But there was also a phrenological report done on these while they were in jail awaiting trial.
Oh my God. It's not funny, but I'm bracing for impact.
Yeah, seriously.
And it's like, so it's, it's people trying to like justify their phrenology, but also, and like they don't know exactly who wrote the phrenological report, but they think it's this guy who was a phrenologist and also an abolitionist. So it's like disgusting and patronizing and gnarly, but it's not like hateful in the way that you might expect. So I'll read you a quote from it. Okay, now that I said that, the first is really bad.
Oh God. Okay. We on this podcast and Gus do not condone what's about to be said.
Yeah.
Several have small heads, even for Africans. Their leader, Cinque, who killed the captain of the schooner, is a well-made man of 24 or 25 years of age. His head is long from the front to the back and rises high above the ear, particularly in the regions of self-esteem and firmness. The size and form...
Like mental firmness? Like what kind of firmness?
No. Like a ripe peach. The size and form of the brain indicate considerable mental power, decision, self-reliance, prompt perception, and readiness of action.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Huh. I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear, because I feel like you did actually set it up well, that he is a phrenologist. He's the guy who wrote this, possibly a phrenologist and an abolitionist, which to me, like from what I know of phrenology and abolitionism, that they are almost conflicting things. And this statement very much, I feel like, exemplifies that. Like, I feel like it's the good with the bad.
Yeah. And phrenologists were very famous for, this is just a side note that I liked very much. They were very famous for making up their own words, such as phrenology and cranioscopy and cranioclepty. And I just feel like when you as a discipline start making up a lot of your own words, like it's kind of gone off the rails and you should stop.
Yeah, when it becomes mostly your own made up words.
Yeah. And it's like when countries put out their own calendars, it's like, no, you're civilization. Like you're trying to invent a new calendar. No, not going well. I also have another story that I can tell, more fun and less structurally traumatic. It's about the composer Haydn's skull.
Haydn's head?
Yes.
Yes, please tell this story.
So you'll recall that the idea of phrenology is that different parts, like the fundamental idea is that different parts of your brains do different things, which is like, okay, I think we still kind of believe that in some capacity. But the idea was that like a certain part of your brain would be more developed and it would push on your skull and give you skull bumps, so that like even after you were dead, your bumps would be able to tell the person, oh, you were a very good horseman.
You were such a good mother. I can tell by your bump here.
You made a mean sloppy Joe. Look at this bump.
Exactly. So then I think you will agree that the proposition follows naturally. We need to collect a bunch of dead famous people's skulls.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to see what's up, like
what their bumps are like. Yes.
Yeah, to like isolate. Well, I mean, what they were truly trying to do is isolate the genius bump. Like they were trying to find out where genius was located.
Such a noble cause.
Right. And the idea, like part of the problem was that they, phrenologists had easy access to criminals' skulls and mentally ill people's skulls, because for one thing, if a prison had just executed someone, they would be like, sure, you can have this corpse. And for another thing, like they, would bury mentally ill people in mass graves or, in a field or whatever, and then phrenologists could just go dig them up, which was very frequent practice. So they had a good idea of like which bumps were associated with being bad, but they needed more data on good bumps.
Please.
Which is the name of my band. So many old-timey famous people have had their skulls stolen for this reason, including Beethoven, Mozart, the Spanish artist Goya, and the man we're going to talk about today, another famous composer, Haydn. And Haydn's skull was stolen by a good friend of his a week after he died in 1809. The friend's name is Joseph Rosenbaum. And he like knew it was going to be tricky because Haydn was like rich and famous and celebrated, and he was going into like a decent cemetery. So he knew that it was going to take some doing. So Mr. Rosenbaum did a practice run and like dug up an actress's body the week before, and he like went off without a hitch. He felt great about it.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
And then just left her on this next to her grave or something, like, oh, done with you. Thanks for the practice. Like...
Exactly. Nice mother bump, by the way.
Anyway, back in the hole.
Right. Oh, and he was also, this guy, Joseph Rosenbaum, he was tight buddies with Franz Joseph Gall, who is the father of phrenology, just to tie it back a little bit.
Full circle, baby.
Exactly. So this is happening in 1809, which you will certainly recall from your world history class, is when the French were invading. Oh, I didn't write down where. I think we're in Vienna right now. But wherever they were, Napoleon was coming for them.
Ain't that always the way?
Yeah. So, but because Napoleon was like literally invading the city, I think, of Vienna, nobody was trying to throw a big fancy funeral, which worked in Mr. Rosenbaum's favor. Nobody was paying much attention, and Haydn got put in the ground like a normal guy. So he got the head, dug up the grave, got the head. And then there are like a bunch of entries in his diary, Mr. Rosenbaum's diary, of him complaining for pages and pages and pages because he was having this glass cabinet built for the head.
Oh
And
my
he was
God.
just complaining about how expensive it was and how long it was taking. And remember, this is like literally like your city is being invaded and ransacked and thousands of people are dying. And you're like, this fucking glass case will be the death of me.
Also, a little perspective, buddy. This is for a stolen head. You can have a little patience.
Right.
Wow.
Anyway, he got the
love
cabinet built finally to
Oh,
his
Thank
best.
goodness.
The eternal struggle, though, am I right? Like,
You
who among
cannot-
us hasn't
Yeah.
been there?
You cannot get a good glass cabinet these days for the life of you.
Exactly. For a head or even for a leg. So 10 years later, some rich
The
people.
cabinet was finally ready.
Yeah.
No. Sorry,
some
I'm
rich
sorry.
people- No, it's good. It's good. 10 years later, some rich people who loved Haydn were like, now it's time to finally throw him the funeral full of pomp and circumstance that he deserved.
Yeah.
You know, just what you need to do with your money sometimes. So they dug him up again. Like, just let him rest, honestly. I
It's
just want
fine.
like, to editorialize a little bit, like, leave him alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. The man is done. He's dead.
He doesn't
right.
need this. You need this.
But then in digging him up, they discovered that his corpse was headless.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that the reason everybody was kind of like, oh, it's that, you know, why they like knew who to look to is I think that he had Mr. Rosenbaum and his friend, whose name I can't remember, had like raised it multiple times with the family and like the patrons who ended up paying for the funeral and had been like, can we please have the skull? And they were like, no. But then when the head was missing, they were like, I think I have a good idea of who has the skull.
This is why you can ask at Tops once before you become that guy where it's like the skull is missing and everyone looks right over at you and you're just like, oh, this is what glass cabinet?
Yeah, I think everybody should have that like embroidered on the throw pillow just so they don't forget. Like you can ask for the skull max one time.
Max one time.
Noted.
Otherwise it's gauche.
Yeah. Tacky.
So the cops came to Mr. Rosenbaum's house. He freaked out. You know, he was scared he was going to lose Haydn's skull. So he put the skull under the bed and made his wife, I wrote in parentheses here, a famous soprano. So now you know that. Lie down on the bed and claim to be on her period to scare the police away from the bed so that they wouldn't look for the head there. And
Oh my God.
to be clear, it worked 100%. They did not investigate further.
Oh, no doubt.
And so Mr. Rosenbaum gave them a different skull because he had it lying around, which I of course, didn't interrogate.
Was it the skull of the actress?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. But he might have also had a large supply. I mean, I assume the cops, if he had given them the actress's skull, the cops would have been like, well, this is clearly a woman's skull. You can see her arts and sciences.
You can see her mother bump. Yeah.
But then Haydn's skull was just missing for like 150 years. And like many famous people would claim to have Haydn's skull and would like bring out skulls at dinner parties and be like, this is Haydn's skull. Eventually they found it. I should have probably figured out more about how they found it, but they got it back, I guess, and did science on it so they know it's the right one or something.
Where is he now? What's he up to?
Yeah, just chilling.
Future Sophie here. Haydn's skull was returned to his tomb in 1954, which ended the 145-year-long burial process. And when they put Haydn's head back in the tomb, they didn't remove the replacement head that had been put in there. So now Haydn is buried with two skulls. Well, 2 heads are better than none.
But yeah, and then somebody paid 1,000 florin, I don't know how much money that is, to Beethoven's gravedigger to get his skull. Goya's head is still at large.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
Yeah, still out there. And then Colin Dickey, who was the guy who was on the radio show I listened to, he wrote a book about stealing heads. But he's the one who says phrenology is still phrenology is at the root of a lot of self-help. And he says like a lot of self-help stuff is just, a lot of the stuff that's like, change this one simple thing and you'll be better. And he's like, that's just phrenology. Like you can improve who you are through exercising this one muscle in your brain or working on one aspect of your personality, which is gnarly.
Shit.
Yeah, that was fascinating. And you're certainly right. I feel like that is at the root of a lot of self-help stuff. That's like, there's a one little key to your life that can change it all. And you just need to work on this one thing. You just need to drink 20 glasses of avocado juice every day and you'll be smarter and richer and prettier than you've ever been.
Totally.
Or get on one of those Peloton bikes.
Oh, fuck those fucking pieces of shit.
My boss truly this morning texted a group text of me and all the other teaching fellows a picture of his Peloton bike because I was making fun of one of the other teaching for her Peloton bike. So this is nice.
I will full circle for you.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, no. Peloton is they hate people's bodies. They hate people's bodies. I love body. I love bodies and bones.
Well, good job, Gus.
Yeah, that was
Thank
awesome.
You. Thank you for coming to my party.
Well, would you like to come to my party?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So we've talked about your qualifications as a law dog extensively, but I have a question about that. And I just want to ask you, would you accept testimony from a ghost?
Absolutely.
Good, because these people did. We're going to talk about the Greenbrier Ghost.
Perfect.
Did you study this case in law school?
Yeah.
It's too raw for law school.
But good thing Gus is a raw law dog.
Yeah, just law dogging it over here.
Oh my God.
Settle down. Order in the fucking court. I'm sorry. My sources for this were an article from HuffingtonPost.com, Wikipedia, AppalachianHistory.net, and WVCulture.org. So we're going to be talking about Elva Zona Hester, who was born in Greenbrier County somewhere around 1873. And we don't know a lot about her early life, but she did end up having a child out of wedlock in 1895. Gus was making a shaming motion. He hates children out of wedlock.
Not okay. There's got to be a bump on the skull for that.
Yes. So in October of 1896, Zona met a very handsome, he's described as a drifter.
Ooh, the sexiest.
Yeah, who doesn't love
guy?
Who doesn't love a drifter? He's named Aramis Stribling Trout Shoe.
No.
Yeah, you lost me at Trout Shoe.
Well, Trout Shoe had recently moved to Greenbrier County in search of a new life. He was going to be a blacksmith and everything was going to be great for him. He found work in the shop of this guy named James Crookshanks, and then he met Zona, a little while after he got to town, and they fell in love immediately. They were smitten and they decided to get married after that, but Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester, instantly, no, she did not like this guy. She was like, I see this dude, I don't like him. He stinks of trouble to me.
Drifter.
He's a drifter.
Okay, so we like her. I'm sorry, I called her a bitch.
No, we like her. She is not a bitch. Or if she's a bitch in a good way. But so they got married and they lived together happily for a short amount of time until January of 1897. on January 23rd, 1897. That morning around 10 a.m., Zona's body was found by Andy Jones, who was the like little neighbor boy who did like errands for her.
No.
Andy boy.
Andy boy.
Come in.
Well, he ran back to his house and he told his mom, and then he ran to the blacksmith shop where Edward Shue, Edward was the name that this guy was going by, the drifter. Edward Trout. He was working at the blacksmith shop, but then he goes home to see what's happened to his wife. Zona was found lying on the floor of their house, face down, with one of her arms outstretched and the other one tucked underneath her chest. And her head was like cocked like way off to the side. Yeah, in like a really horrific, like unnatural way. And so Trout Shue got home before the coroner or any police were able to get there.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We don't love that. And he actually moved his wife's body to the bed, and he dressed her in a high-necked dress with a stiff collar and placed a veil over her face, which is an interesting thing to do when you find your wife dead on the floor, right?
Yeah. She doesn't need a new dress. She needs the police.
She does. By this time, Dr. Knapp, who was Zona's doctor and also like the coroner too, because it's, a small town.
And the vet.
What?
And the vet, the town vet.
Yeah. And he also was a dressmaker. He did it all.
Renaissance man.
Yes, Renaissance man, Dr. Knapp. But he noted that the husband was grieving very extensively and very openly, and it was hard for him to do an examination on her because he kept like holding her like head and shoulders and like rocking back and forth and crying, and wouldn't really let the doctor get super close to the body. But the doctor did note that there was some bruising on her neck. He did write that down. But again, he tried to look closer, and Trout was like, my wife. He's like, okay, I'll just put the death down as the cause of death to be everlasting faint, which is...
What?
Yeah. Which is like, speak for like a heart attack or some sort of like cause of death that is like immediate and like unexplained.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'd like to change the name of my band to that.
Noted. Zona's parents were informed of her death, and when Mary Jane Hester, her mom, heard, she was reported to have said, quote, "The devil has killed her." So she maybe has some thoughts about what had happened.
Yeah, she hates that guy, Trout Shue.
Well, we might not like him either.
Okay.
So Zona was buried on January 24th, 1897 in a local cemetery. Her body was prepared for burial, and Trout was very involved with the burial preparations. He placed her body in the casket, always handling her head. He placed a folded sheet on one side of her head and an article of clothing on the other, kind of like propping it, like setting it so it would like sit straight instead of falling off to one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And he also put a scarf on her, which he tearily sobbed was her favorite.
Oh, of course. Cover that neck at all costs.
Gotta cover that neck. What are we covering? Trout showed a lot of devotion during the vigil. He kept the coffin open, but he didn't let anyone get very close to her. He wouldn't let anyone get very close to the coffin. And people noted that that was weird. People were like, this guy is acting very suspicious.
Just close the casket then.
I know, right?
I mean, I don't want to help you get away with this, I guess, but it's like, come on, sir.
he's really showing his cards the whole time, because when it came to move the corpse like to the cemetery, several people noticed that her like head seemed loose, but again he wouldn't really let anyone observe her like going in the ground. So then, according to legend, a couple weeks go by, and in the middle of the night, Zona's mother wakes up from a dead sleep, and Zona appears to her. And she said that it wasn't like a dream, that it felt like it was in person. And the apparition manifested as a light and then turned into a human being. And then for 4 consecutive nights, Zona appeared to her mother. And on one of the nights, she reported the facts of her crime to her mom. She said that Shu, our guy Trout, was a terrible and abusive man who was physically abusive to her and attacked her in a fit of rage when he said that like she had not cooked any meat for dinner. And then he strangled her and crushed her windpipe at the first joint. The ghost made sure to say that. Yuck. And to prove this, the ghost turned her head around backwards.
Yeah, you hate that. Ugh. Yuck.
Yeah. Word got quickly around the town that Mary Jane was having these visions, and everyone in the town was kind of whispering that Trout had killed her daughter. And Mary Hester and her brother-in-law went to prosecutor John A. Preston, who at first was like, I'm not going to take this case because there's a ghost involved. This is like fucking ridiculous, right? Like if someone came to you and was like, Gus, a ghost told me that there was a crime. What would you say?
I mean, I'm really sorry to hear that.
I'm sorry to hear that. That sucks.
My condolences.
I'm just sorry.
Yeah. Well,
you wouldn't take the case. You would just walk away.
Thank you for telling me. Thank you so much.
Backing away slowly. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Well, this guy kind of took the opposite approach because he interrogated her for hours. Until
the ghost or
the
mom,
the mother of the murder
victim.
Mom. Yeah, okay. The ghost mom interrogated her for hours, and then he was like, okay, you know what? I actually believe it. And like whether or not he believed it or not, like really, he thought that there was enough reason to doubt that this was natural causes to like open something up. I feel like he heard enough suspicious shit to be like, okay, there might not be a ghost involved, but something is happening here.
Yeah.
This drifter ain't right.
So Preston goes to speak to Dr. Knapp, who was the one who performed the kind of like post-death examination. And Dr. Knapp was like, you know what? Actually, I beefed it because I didn't really look at the body very well. And like I could have done a more thorough examination. And Preston is like, fuck yeah, time for an exhumation. So Zona's body was exhumed and they were able to do an autopsy, which was performed on February 22nd of 1897 in a local one-room schoolhouse, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, God.
Because he was the doctor, the coroner, a dressmaker, the vet, and the teacher.
Yeah. He had to teach first and second period, and then he was going to do the autopsy at recess.
Right.
So Trout had vigorously complained about this happening. He did not want an autopsy, but apparently he was legally required to be at the autopsy.
What?
Yeah, which is like, what?
There are too many laws.
That's the name of this episode.
There are too many laws. But this part is interesting because of course, during the autopsy, they see that her neck is broken, that she has been strangled to death. And so they immediately arrest, Trout. And Trout says that he knew that he would be arrested But he said, quote, "They will not be able to prove I did it." So he's basically just,
He's begging for it.
Yeah. Okay, so the autopsy did end up lasting 3 days, and they found that Zona's neck had indeed been broken. And according to the report published on March 9th, quote, "The discovery was made that the neck was broken and the windpipe mashed. On the throat were marks of fingers indicating that she had been choked. The neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebrae."
Oh my God.
So that's pretty specific. Remember, the ghost had said at the first joint.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of creepy. Of course, the strength of this evidence leads to Trout's arrest. And during this time, they begin to look into old Trout's background. And it is revealed that he had already served a term in penitentiary for a different crime. And he had been married twice before.
Yeesh.
And both of his previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances.
Yep.
Oh, gosh.
One of the wives was said to have a broken neck when she fell off a haystack.
No. Why was she on top of a haystack?
I don't know. She was doing her fun haystack dance. And then, this is crazy, the other wife died while helping Trout to repair a chimney. He was on top of the chimney, and his wife was placing the rocks in a basket with a rope attached to it, and the basket was drawn up and turned over and dropped a rock on her head.
Okay.
Probably.
Does that sound
No.
Does that sound right to you? He's making
Law
a face
dog
that says no.
Law
Yeah.
dog, what do you think?
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. No. Also in jail, he said that he had an ambition to be married 7 times. So
Ew.
he was really wanting to do this a couple more times.
Gross.
I know. His trial began on June 22nd of the same year, and Mary Hester was one of the witnesses. The prosecutor confined his questioning to just the known facts of the case, not really talking about the ghost sightings. But then when Trout Shoe's lawyer came up, he was all about the ghost story. He was trying to make her seem unreliable. He was trying to make it seem as though she was kind of this crazy old lady who didn't really know what she was talking about. But things really flipped for him because she would not back off of what she was saying. And I actually was hoping I have a little part of the transcript from this questioning, and I was hoping that perhaps I could get the two of you to read it.
Absolutely. Katelyn, I feel like it goes without saying, but I'm going to be the old woman and you're going to be the lawyer.
Okay. All right. I'm fine with it.
Should I do this in my accent?
Yes.
Do it. Okay, here are your motivations, Gus. You're an old woman whose daughter has been murdered by an absolute monster who's been concealing his identity this whole time. And Katelyn, you're the You're the defense lawyer who's trying to make this old woman look like a daughtery, senile old fool.
Okay.
All right, whenever you're ready.
I have heard that you had some dream or vision which led to this post-mortem examination.
It was no dream. She came back and told me that he was mad that she didn't have no meat cooked for supper, but she said she had plenty. Every night she came just as she did the first night. She came 4 times and 4 nights, but the second night she told me that her neck was squeezed off at the first joint, and it was just as she told me.
Now, Mrs. Hester, this sad affair was very particularly impressed upon your mind, and there was not a moment during your waking hours that you did not dwell upon it?
No, sir, and there is not yet either.
And was this not a dream founded upon your distressed condition of mind?
No, sir, it was no dream, for I was as wide awake as I ever was.
Then if not a dream or dreams, what do you call it?
I prayed to the Lord that she might come back and tell me what had happened, and I prayed that she might come herself and tell on him.
Do you think that you actually saw her in flesh and blood?
Yes, sir, I do. I told them the very dress that she was killed in, and when she went to leave me, she turned her head completely around and looked at me like she wanted me to know all about it. And the very next time she came back to me, she told me all about it. The first time she came, she seemed that she did not want to tell me as much about it as she did afterwards. The last night she was there, she told me that she did everything she could do, and I'm satisfied that she did do all that too.
Now, Mrs. Hester, don't you think that these visions, as you term them or describe them, were nothing more or less than 4 dreams founded upon your distress?
No.
Mrs. Hester, are you positively sure that these are not 4 dreams?
Yes, sir, it was not a dream. I don't dream when I'm wide awake, to be sure, and I know I saw her right there with me.
End scene.
That's really long and I'll probably cut some of it, but I wanted to put some of it in because I think the tone of his questioning is pretty shitty, where he's like,
that 4 dreams?
Are you sure you didn't just have 4 dreams?
He's very bad at doing cross-examination, let me just say.
I believe you, Law Dog.
You think that was not great questioning?
No, he should really have shut her up and not let her say all that stuff.
Yeah, but like you kind of saw, it really backfired on him because the whole town, it was convinced of this story, and it only took the jury about an hour and 10 minutes before returning a verdict of guilty for him. He was then, of course, sentenced to life in prison. A mob did form to try to kill him, but it was disbanded. And then he was moved to West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, where he lived for 3 more years and then died of an unknown disease in 1900. This case is just interesting because Mrs. Hester never recanted the story of her daughter's ghost. And I think a lot of people believe that she saw during the wake or during the burial, she saw something suspicious about her daughter's body and made up the story to incite the investigation, because it was said by many people like who are close to the family that she believed right off the bat that her daughter's husband killed her daughter.
Yeah.
But it was funny because the judge said that since the defense had brought up the ghost stuff, that it had to be considered.
Yeah.
That's how the law works, man.
That's how the law works. But I just
the ghost back in the box, that old expression, the ghost's out of the bag.
You can't put the ghost back in the box. I've heard so many lawyers say that.
Yeah.
Well, that's my story.
That's
Great
our
story.
Podcast right there.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Gus, for being on.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah. Hope you have a good rest of your sunny Berkeley Sunday.
Thank you.
We're going to just enjoy the rain here. Thank you. Yep.
And if you're listening to this podcast, listener, and you're enjoying it or you enjoy the podcast in general, feel free to share it with someone else. Pass on an episode. Be like, hey, if you like an old bone, how about an old bone podcast?
And really quick before we go, we just launched our website. So it has all kinds of fun stuff on there. So check us out, anythingbonespodcast.squarespace.com.
Yeah, you can check out episodes and pictures and even possibly some fun bonus content in the future. Woo! Well, I think that's all the bone business we have.
Yep. Thanks, Gus. Love you.
Love you too. Thank you.
Bon voyage.
Bon voyage. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Anything Bones Podcast, or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
At Chubby Scrubby on Twitter.
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
At Camilla Strader on Instagram.
for our beautiful bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe. my lifestyle.